Okay, so welcome to our map educational session for people in Highland Park who frequently ask questions about addresses and where things are located and have to kind of go through a complex procedure to find what they're looking for because of changes of addresses and access. This is, of course, it's an early map of where Highland Park stands from when it was part of New France. Maps change, places change, people's languages change, but we have ways to trace back through maps. I put some links in here and I'll share the PDF with some other New France maps and links to the maps I've actually used. I've also, and if you're not familiar with him, Coronelli was a cartographer. He was a friar from Italy, and Louis XIV liked him so much he invited him to Paris to make globes for him, and that's why his maps are very distinctly beautiful. We have some new items up on the Illinois Digital Archive, and including some very interesting, why is it, it's kind of going, including some previously unknown cookbooks, and also interestingly, because the west side of Highland Park is not as well documented as the east side. It was mostly, although it was settled at the same time, it wasn't developed like a suburb. So the Westridge groups have not as well known, but it's so great to find out that not only do we have a cookbook from them, but we also have a cookbook that they did for the Park Ridge Girls School. And that is up on IDA now. And also, so Mr. Ritzenoli is member to date, but if you'd like to join for 2026, of course, you can click on the link in the document to join us. So people frequently look for places. They look for places like the Moraine Hotel. And in fact, the Moraine Hotel is the most popular search, both in our catalog and on our IDA and DPLA, the Digital Life of America. People call looking for addresses. Of course, this one, it says right in the back from the Green Family Collection that it's at Sheridan and Central. And we'll see a little bit later which corner it is on Sheridan Central. People have many times called the Historical Society and said, well, I was driving by, I was looking for my grandma's house. I have an envelope right here, but it's not there. And frequently we can tell them that it is there and where it is. Sometimes it's been torn down, absolutely. But one thing I want to point out first and foremost, going forward, what has not changed? The name of the township has changed. It also at one point split into East and West Deerfield. But what has not changed are the blocks and the lots in Highland Park. Because you can see here, lot 22, if you can see there, and they're up in Lacorny, F Stupy, a little different spelling than Stupy. But if you go to today's Marine map from just last year, and you look at 22, it is now you see Exmoor there. And also I've included the links. I will bring that up later. Block 22, where the Stupy cabin once stood, is still lot block 22, where Exmoor Country Cloud now stands. What has changed considerably and repeatedly, and we can see that through Sanborn maps, are the numbers and street names. This is a 1900 Sanborn map, and what you can see the numbers are very different than what you would see now on St. John's, because the purpose of these maps, of course, are for fires. You can look, these are links. You can access Sanborn maps, the Library of Congress, through the current copyright owners, and academic consortiums like Carly for Illinois, or University of Michigan, or Michigan State. And just to show, of course, some probably all these that are no longer under copyright are now at the Library of Congress. So how do we trace back if you have a house number or house name from 1900? You have to know when they changed, looking at the ordinances. The numbers are kind of haphazard in straight away, and yet odd number and even numbers on the same side of the street. And so in 1905, Highland Park enacted an ordinance to set the street names. And the next Sanborn map, they added the new numbers. And as you can see here as well, they put two sets of numbers. So you could see the old and the new number. Just a few years later, in 1915, they decided again that they were not working well, so they had to renumber the buildings, and they did under Hastings. So here we have again, just 10 years later, establishing a street numbering for the city of Highland Park. And once again, this is the same view. You can see they've shown both sets of numbers. So now you have, for some places, 3 sets of numbers for Highland Park. And if you're researching what happened there, you'd want to search under all 3 numbers. In 1924, things had kind of settled, supposedly, and also Highland Park had settled, in the fact that Highland Park's boundaries would change little after 1924, where they changed repeatedly within Deerfield Township, or now Moraine Township, in these years preceding. The only really changes, a couple minor borders, and of course, Sheridan. And so this have the number system. But then we go on later, in 1949, Fire Marshal Henning announces that they just don't work the way the numbers are now, because they're too similar. As pieces have been added on, some street names were the same, the numbers were inconsistent. So they appointed a new committee, and from 1950 to 1952, all the street numbers changed, and some street names too. So as you can imagine, there were a lot of discussions in the paper, like, why are we doing this? Why do we have 2 numbers? But ultimately, the change took over. So the good news is, if your house was built, or you're looking for an address after 1952, it probably has not changed. But anything before, it has. And that's why I kind of included this map. All these maps are available on the Digital Library of America, and I've included the link in the document. When the kind of Highland Park's boundary settled. Of course, preceding that, even though people may have lived in the West, like Westridge townships, not within Highland Park borders, in the vernacular, they referred to themselves as Highland Park. And also, like people in Ravinia referred to themselves as Ravinians. And there I have a link to the maps. So some examples of recent searches or working with people that have questions are next. So someone asked about a bottling company, which in fact moved a couple times before the Wink family bought it in 1915. In the newspaper, there's been many announcements announcing the new Wink Bottling Company on Green Bay Road, on First Street. A few years later, it announces they've expanded to Green Bay. And someone started asking me, now, when did they move? I see this, I see that, I see this in the map. And then looking closely, they really never moved at all. From the first move in 1915, they simply expanded out towards Green Bay. And in this 1924 map, you can, not even the number for 425 Green Bay Road is not showing yet, but that will become the Highland Park beverage number for the rest of its life. But now, if you were to look what's there, and it's not exactly the same building, it's not a bottling company. Soda bottling companies, of course, are much more prevalent, and water purification bottling companies in the late 19th and 20th century. You can see 2115 Green Bay Road, exactly in the same place. So 2 completely different numbers. Although this came about in 1915, so before the other changes. And there's a picture of the Wink bottle. And like the Wink, the other things, Wink bought his enterprise from Mr. Huber, and Wink's bottling company was bought by another pair of gentlemen, a Smith and a Greenwald. So there's a constant evolution of, and with business, you see that with businesses, but you kind of have to weave through to find your answer. There's different places, and if you're looking for Wink and where they were, you might have to take a couple steps before, probably first looking for 402nd, which is nowhere near Green Bay Road. Another kind of interesting address challenge that we come across is with street facing changes. So here you can see this is from the same atlas I've cited above, the 1885 atlas of Lake County. It is available online at the Library of Congress. I included the link, and it's also available in hard copies at the library. And Ravinia annexed to Highland Park in 1899, so you will also see in catalogs, library catalogs, in books, everywhere you'll see references to Illinois, long after Ravinia annexed. You see this little pink triangle here. It says B.F. Jacobs. Jacobs, of course, is one of the founders of Ravinia and a leader in what was called the Sunday school movement to standardize Baptist Sunday school literature, and he actually helped lead this. So this was one of the first churches in the area, one of the first Sunday schools, if not the first Sunday school. And it became different. It changed denominations a few times. Eventually, it became, as it is now, a private home. So what was at 1545 Judson became 750 Dean. So we can't use the Sanborn maps to find this because Ravinia does not show up on the Sanborn maps until the 1930s or 40s. That is one of the challenges with the maps. They were created, the company was founded after the Civil War, and was founded after the Civil War to share fire, of course, fire safety and to help insurers do underwriting. But now we use them very much for finding places and doing historical researches. And there's, of course, Deerfield Town, which was in Deerfield Township, now in West Deerfield Township. So this little triangle here, it could have been Roger Williams too. They could have changed it to that. So whenever you're looking for an address, you want to look at the maps. And I also check, publications and address books to make sure the same name and the same address and the same place are included. And there you can see, again, this is the last Sanborn map that is out of copyright. If you access Sanborn maps through consortia, like Carly from Illinois universities or University of Michigan, you can get some 33 and some of the later ones, but you cannot broadcast them. That's why I didn't include it. It was very clear that you cannot broadcast them. And you can see if you're looking for something that outlies this area, and it grew incredibly over the years, you might have to follow a different tactic, like older maps, like using the blocks, like using directories and multiple addresses. But if you're within this area, you can look at that and just look at the place and see, okay, I'm looking for the corner of Lake and Central, and that's what I want to find. Another challenge that we answer is if people just call their house by a name, houses with names. And in this case, in addition to having a name, it gives a street name, Circle Avenue, and it's no longer called Content, and it's no longer on Circle Avenue. But and this is like where the family actually used different addresses. You can see here Crescent Court, which was Circle, and it's called the Fessenden subdivision even in 1924 after they'd moved away. Mrs. Fessenden was the founder of the Highland Park Women's Club, quite the socialite. And even the family, they built this house, and in some of the city directors, they say they're living on Prospect. In the 1910 census, they say they're living on Circle. In 1913 city directory, they say they're living on Prospect again, but really they're at that little corner where they had several buildings, and actually just recently sold. And that's all these little examples I've given here are a result of questions that have called me with people looking where did the wings expand? When did the Greenwalds buy it? And that number and that map is key. And the real estate agent, what information do you have about this? Where is Circle Avenue? I don't see it on the map. It's not there anymore. So we go to the Sanborn maps. And of course, Highland Park is not the only city that changes numbers. Chicago did, and many other cities. And we're going to go back in a little bit and look at just using the Sanborn maps. Look up to show some of the links. So I put a warning here because chic road, that's not very polite, right? But at one point, right after they were changing street names again. People change street names periodically. You may have never heard of Maria Street, of Portland Avenue, but they still exist, but under different names, including Sheridan. But apparently, just after a few months, McDaniel's, not even a few months, and McDaniel's is going to become Eldarum Road. I think because Ben-Hur and some of the associations with Ben-Hur and Christianity were very popular at the time. This is a slide from the George Rice collection. George Rice was the chaplain at Fort Sheridan. He lived and was friends with Orson Brand at the they did all kinds of stuff together, and somehow his photographs survived, as did most of Brand's, and a good record not just of Highland Park, but also of the chaplain's work in Highland Park, at Fort Sheridan, and practically all over the world. So we don't know why they were going to change the street or why they changed it back just a few months later. And kind of Fairview and Bobolink, they just kind of adjusted and moved it. And there's a lot of building going on at the time too. So this is often one of the cases where you really want to go to the blocks and lot number. And if there's any question at all, people can always, that's your last question, is to go to the Lake County Recorder's Office and check the lot and block number to see that that's the right location. I also want to note one of the search challenges is if you search in Ancestry, any of the Ancestry products, for something in a city directory in Highland Park before 1925, it had indexed itself as Waukegan. So you will only find it if you do exact search Waukegan. And then it'll bring up a city directory that is maybe, say, Waukegan. Waukegan is the capital, of course, of Lake County. It's not the capital or county seat. But there's many other, sometimes it's just all of Lake County, sometimes just a few, but that is where you'll find many address listings. And we use it frequently to help people trace down who, what, why, and where. So I was kind of planning, we don't have a lot of people here, to go through Library of Congress and work so how we use the maps when we're trying to help people find addresses. So does someone want to volunteer address they'd like to find?
Well, I don't exactly have an address I want to find, but what have been the more challenging addresses for you to shush out?
Well, the most challenging were when they fell off the side of the map, and McDaniel's was one of those. And an example of that is the first meetings of the Società Modenese, the Italian Mutual Aid Society, met on McDaniel's. And when I first was looking at the meetings, and looking at the maps and looking at the numbers, I was really confused because I didn't know that there'd been the additional 2 changes. But because McDaniel's does not show up, and I'll show you. So if you look at, let's go to the 1912s. One additionally helpful aspect of the Sanborn maps is they do list the subdivisions by name, because people say, oh, I live in the Fessenden subdivision or the Streeter block. And those are all, full of history too. So you don't see, even though people were living on McDaniel's, and it was west of the tracks was more of a working bourgeois class. There were businesses on McDaniel's. There is no McDaniel's. There's a McGovern right over there, but you can look and you can see McGovern.
McDaniel's, isn't that
Is
by the church?
it's right over here. It's just off the map. And you
Okay.
can see, they're thinking about underwriting, even though there's houses and businesses all along here.
Now I'm seeing St. John's.
Yep.
I'm seeing Laurel Avenue.
Uh-huh.
Oh, now I see McGovern. Okay, finally I see it. Okay. Okay, I
McGovern.
now, yep. Sorry.
And of course, because of its purpose, they show the Presbyterian Church, the military academy, which burned down twice, the the Christian Science Church, which is still there, the Presbyterian Church there, um, and little pieces that they want. There was a lumber yard. I'm just guessing without looking. And you find where say we weren't looking for McDonald's, we're looking for something on Deerfield Avenue, which kind of, you can see it changed. It's moved. Some other streets have moved too. There's an index right here. And we want to go, and what page? So we want to look and see what the page we can go to. Exmoor, where Stoopy was. Or, and so if you go to some of these pages that have multiple buildings on them, you can. This is not necessarily helpful for a kind of query for a street, but they do give you information. But if you go up to 1924, and hopefully usually down here you have the other city from the same city, and also some information about other Highland Park materials at the Library of Congress. We get to 1924, and I remember in particular that this was before I knew that the changes taken place in 1905 or 15. So I'm looking on trying to find where exactly this important mutual aid society was started. There's Maria Street. Maria Street is no longer. Um, but you can look and you can match. I will usually toggle back and forth. McDaniel Avenue 5 and 6. Now you can see it's this as the city is expanding, although not the city, it's all about the fire limits underwriting. Then you can see McDaniel's subdivision, McDaniel the street, but really only a tiny corner really falls in. And that can be frustrating because you try, when answering someone's question, you want to do with a certain, get it back to them quickly. We have a standard of in archives and libraries of up to 1 hour free research. I surpass that. People need, and I try, but I really try and get people what they need quickly. But you can really see it doesn't show you very much of McDaniel there, just that little corner. But you can kind of guess and count and then cross-reference with other reasons. Now, and McDaniel goes much further than that. But the most challenge, I think, is when you have to go more than one map, more than one place. And in that case, when that's happening, I go to more than one source to verify that I'm getting the right. And there's other places you can check too, the historic preservation lists from the city, doing a search in HathiTrust or doing a search in Google Books can confirm or change your information on what you found or going to find. I frankly, I use these almost every day. Every time I'm answering a question for someone, because they do frequently allow homes maps. So if you look, I want to show you 1900. And I think the numbers were incredibly haphazard, occasionally too, in Highland Park in the early years. But the first map in 1900, it just really shows a very small area. And remember that the area that's now developed, West Ridge and where Hibernia, Sunset Golfing, Ridge Road, is nothing where people living there. There were people living there, but there were farms and 40, 80 acres of land. But you see, they don't even include here, they don't include the homes. And this is lined with homes going all the way to the lake, back to Library of Congress. I'm sorry, to Lake Michigan.
So on that property, on the bottling property,
Yes.
From looking at your map, my thought was that is probably where the dance school is. I
Mackay
probably, whatever it is, yeah. It looks to me, I mean, where it is, because I see where the gas station sort of is,
or
or
was?
was, not yet. Um, but right next to it is that dance school. At least that's my mental image of that area.
We can look that very quickly. And this is what I do in my process when people ask me for these informations. I'll go I start with Google or Google Books, depending on how far it goes back, so I can get my bearings of what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it happens quickly, and sometimes it does not. It's important to remember your basic searching Boolean skills because if you put a quotation in a quotation not, you're not going to get the right thing. You might get Highland Park, Michigan. You might get Highland Park, New Jersey or California. And we do, as Catherine knows, at least once a month we get phone calls for Highland Park, other Highland Parks,
Elsewhere.
mostly Michigan. And I
Okay,
answer them. So is one.
so there's that dance school over there to the left. I don't know which one is 2115, but
And they're not the same. I don't think there's much left of those bottling buildings. That was quite the operation. Um,
yeah,
there's
to
the
clear them out.
productions.
Right,
Map
that's
that
that.
you are cartoon. Just that would have been because as they were filling in that whole block there as they expanded. They had contracts with Hydrox Water and other spring waters to bottle water. This is a time when people are starting to think about food and water purity, and there's been some issues. So they advertise that that is what they sell.
So you don't think it's the dance school? It's just probably the building just doesn't exist.
I do not think the building exists. My
Okay.
other trick for that is you can start by cheating, right? You can start by just
Cheating or resourcefulness?
I always consider Google search a little bit cheating. I put something in like year built, and it's not, and there'll be listings, commercial listings that are a little bit less reliable. And,
Interesting.
but I'll tell you, so you're not getting really anything here, but if I were to put in, for example, the Fessenden's house, it will show me. No, Redfin's not necessarily correct. You would always want to check that, but Redfin's approximately correct. Yeah, to tell you, they say tell you that is. You used to be able to look that up on Lake County Recorder's website, um,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to pay for that now. So you're built 1901.
Oh,
It's actually built 1903, but you know what? We're not going to fuss, right? That gives us a general idea. And another way, so you just if you're going here on Central Avenue, you can see it kind of it doesn't go much. It's 200, 218. This one does not have the cross references, but as you can see, so we talked about they said Lester Green's Rosebush was at Sheridan Central, and it just so happens I know from over research over the year that his family had a bakery. The Streeters, the Greens, the bakers were very involved in hospitality in Highland Park, and they also had a home above the bakery, so that's where we would get the number from and then convert it from the 1924. But the number in the earlier would be, I'm going to go back to 7.
by the way, when you were talking about that street, Circle Street,
Yes.
there's not too many circle streets in Highland Park, I think, but immediately the one that came to mind was Roslyn.
Oh, yeah, and that's, yes.
That was my guess, is because that, I mean, I until I got acquainted with some people there, I was really confused on that street.
So what I was going to so here, so we look at Central because so much was happening on Central, the businesses, movie theaters, the Opera House. The same corner, you can see it shows you the numbers previously and the numbers current. And you'll see that they were not odd, even were not consistent. So it's people say that that can't be, but it is, right? So there we have. The other way, so we do have a chart online and it's kind of older technology called History Pin,
Oh, yes.
but it's not, but Google kind of abandoned it. It would never took off in popularity. There are some apps that, like for Atom, there's an app for Atom now that I'm hoping that we can put in that can do that as well, that will work with the GIS. In fact, Sanborn, the copyright for the old maps are owned by Lightbox, a company called Lightbox. But the company, the descendant of the company founded in 1866, is now a GIS company. They've evolved. They're meeting their needs. So,
What's a GIS company?
um,
Oh, sorry.
geographic is, oh my gosh, I know what it
I think
is.
GIS is Graphical Information Systems.
Thank you. Thank you. I knew what it did, but I didn't know what the acronym actually stood for.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's true, though. I did not know that. I know GIS and what it does and how to use it, but I didn't know what it stood for. So there. So one thing I also included in the links for people is to show how, and not just our maps, we put, of course, many maps on the Digital Library of America. If you search Highland Park, you will get maps and you can sort them and download them. Plat books. The plat books are very helpful. I use them also frequently. And again, you can use, they have the lot numbers and the block numbers. And you can search also within IDA, the Illinois Digital Library, because every state has its own rules and you put your stuff in IDA or whatever state you live in, and then it's added to the Digital Library of America. And we do that, of course, as you can see, and then it's harvested by the Digital Library. They haven't done a harvesting in quite a long time of Illinois. And it's very slow sometimes. But there's many places, and I've gone, so I do them very quickly. I search the Highland Park News. I'll just take that address they give me and search it. So if someone were to give me 425 Green Bay, I might go to Google Books. So that's, I guess, me when I'm lazy. For much of the work that we do or try to do, um, we go to deep links. They're not just going to come up in the first page. And there's Green Bay roads everywhere, of course. So it's easy to go through a few pages. But if I add bottling, there we go. You get beverage distributors, the Greenwalds. Apparently they distributed Pabst. I don't know how they quite did that in Highland Park in 1938, but they did.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow.
So what came up, and this is the correct address, Greenwald who bought, and Smith, they bought the company from the Winks. But
Oh,
you see
okay.
in the ad, they say that they are distributors of Pabst products, but they can't be distributing beer in Highland Park unless they do it outside of the town. That's a whole other issue.
Oh, you mean they could, so this is during Prohibition or when
This
we were
is,
dry.
well, this is post-Prohibition, 1938, but Highland Park was dry, of course, until 1972.
Right. Well,
So,
that's
and
a
this,
trick they pulled off then.
well, I think that
But a distributor, well, I'm just thinking how they pulled it off.
I don't know, but when I was researching this last week for someone, it certainly came up frequently. They expanded, they water and soda pop, and of course, on the opposite, when Prohibition came about, so many of the breweries had shifted immediately to water and soda pop. And I also do the same things with the Hothy Trice Digital Library. And there's a lot of cross material. However, the algorithms and the structure and the searches and what you can do with them after is very different. And sometimes if I'm just kind of stumped, I'll just put that address in here. So see 1840 circle.
By the way, when I went to that program in Russell, talking about the history of Russell, Illinois, which is on the Illinois-Wisconsin border, the places that served alcohol, when they stopped doing that, then they started to go to pop, to soda or whatever, but they had to get a separate license for soda. It was its own unique license to serve soda, which I imagine is no longer an issue, but.
And so I didn't put Illinois, so I get all kinds of Michigan stuff in here too. But so and sometimes you don't get something the first
Hey,
time.
George, do you have any comments about this, the Sanborn maps and what have you? Because I know you're so learned.
Well, not really. I do. I think that some of the maps had, when things change, rather than print a new map, they would just paste things over it on some of them.
Absolutely. And in the hard copies that are at the library, you can see that.
Also about the soda license, I believe that's because the carbon dioxide in soda came from a fermentation product. So that was part of the concern about the alcohol ban.
That's absolutely nothing I even considered. That's very useful. Thank you, George.
And of course, these are pre-internet maps, and every page is painstakingly drawn by Highland Park city engineers. And this is going to be the 1925 is going to be the final last map, but of course it was not.
I mean, now maps are like the Google. I mean, part of it, I'm sorry, but get back to Google. They have the aerial visions, they have the street vision. And I've heard if you want your address to be, smeared out, your house, whatever, they'll do it, but it's one time. So if somebody later wants to insert their home, have it included, they won't do it, is what I've heard.
Interesting. And you can see how, you see these, page 6 adjoins here where they, paste this enormous map in pages. And actually, I have these, in addition to they're available hard, I have these downloaded in PDF so I can myself don't have to wait for IDA to load, as it can be slow. And the other challenge I think for researchers is that this is a PDF, but the single maps we put up in JPEGs at a lower resolution to accommodate the IDA and DPLA servers, whereas when we capture them, we put them in high resolution TIFFs. And we of course maintain those, but the JPEGs that we put up get lossy, and they don't have, even after a couple years, they don't have the clarity that they did. So I always tell people, please let me know and I can create a link to get you the high resolution, because the JPEG doesn't even look like it did 2 years ago. So I'd ask if there are any more questions. I won't keep you longer.
We want to be kept longer. We're interested. We're the fans.
Thank you. Thank you. And I have to say, I'm not necessarily a map person. I'm a number person. So that's why I think with the Google searches and the numbers, and it's easier for me. Someone that's more visual might approach it very differently. And I sometimes I don't think they're pretty and lovely, but I just, Kathy knows I have a very numerical mind, and I put everything in those number pieces to process them.
George, when you look at a map, how do you? Oh, my internet connection's unstable. All right, back to seeing people move again. So George, when you look at a map, what's your approach?
It'll vary depending on the map and what my purpose is.
Well, yeah.
Sometimes I'm just looking at them for the visual aspect, the artistry. Um, if we're looking for something specific, that's another matter entirely. So I like the detail where of these maps where it shows streets and even individual buildings. That's always fun to see.
Thank you.
Yeah. And to see how they're outlined. Because, the house I used to live in, there were additions made to it that probably were not part of these maps because that addition, we don't really know when it was done, actually.
And as a sidebar, when people have questions about that, the city building department began keeping good records around 1927. And if you FOIA your address, they can tell you every building permit that was issued, which is very helpful to some people, especially if they're trying to do renovations themselves or trying to figure out an answer.
But you have to
So,
FOIA?
yes, it's
Wow.
actually, I was first struck because if I want something from them, I FOIA them too. Um, but it kind of works because they're city planners and someone has a question, they want to know specifically what the question is and answer it. And in the end, it works, I think, I hope.
Just an expensive approach using the FOIA system.
Well, actually, I think it might save money because if you have someone and you really say they have to ask exactly what they want, right? Not just, oh, tell me about my house. And so that keeps the query to a specific set. Um, it's the same thing as asking a reference question in a different way. And I'm surprised how often the city denies it too, but that's one of the things. So yeah, that's it just kind of it's the system they use. And it also provides a filter if they, don't think that they want to share that information. So I had a professor from Lake Forest call me because he was so upset that he had asked him for information about the city from building the city hall and they wouldn't give it to him for security purposes. But it was in an architecture magazine from the 1930s, so we found it pretty quickly that way. The amount of materials, not just by us, but by books and periodicals that is available on HathiTrust Internet Archive, I also use frequently. I found some interesting periodicals that gave us information about the boy-built homes and the postmodern building in Highland Park that I've never found that very rare that you could check out and make copies of and return. That I always found that a great help. Just, whereas, in 10 years ago, even you might know it was there, but you had limited digital materials and you can get it from another archivist, but that's time consuming. But of course, that's still only a very small percentage of materials are digitized, but we all know that. But what we have, we use and are widely used. You can see here the page, the Marine Hotel, which of course does not exist anymore, is now a dog park and dog beach. Any other questions?
No. But I think the most lively part of this talk, sorry, was when we had this back and forth talking about specific things. Because it's really it tests your knowledge, but we also get to understand how you do the search. Because that sometimes is, goes a long way to understanding how the search is conducted with the Boolean search tags and stuff. So that was
And
great. Thank you.
you find out the house name. And there's some standard texts like the Book of the North Shore, the second Book of the North Shore, and that are digitized that again I have downloaded PDFs, so I have them, so I have to wait for them to download it. And I know that it'll give me very key pieces of information about the city. In fact, the writer of both those books lives in Highland Park.
Which book?
Book of the North Shore 1 and 2. They're written
Oh, okay.
1910 and the teens, and they have some really lovely pictures and information, and it's very a small subset of Highland Park, and it doesn't interest me nearly as much as other parts. But it still has some important keys that you can help move forward. In fact, we were trying to find information about Kim Stone's house, the former alderman last year, and somehow it went through Susan Benjamin to Jean, circled around and came to me. And I found it because it was so like this, the Mrs. So and so's house name on Maple. And because I went to those books, I knew that would, I thought I kind of to be a place I would find it. So knowing your subject, if you're researching a farmer, you research differently than you're researching a banker, or you're researching a farm on the west side, you research differently than a big house with two sets of stairways on the east side of Highland Park.
By the way, that reminds me, you were talking about that house where the family had given the house a name and there was a street address. How do you how is that information about what somebody refers to their residence as collected? Because that's kind of like, a vanity plate of sorts, isn't it?
It's absolutely. It depends on the source. It might be a book or magazine might have the name or used in a letter or pictures, and that's the only people that know. And you do get queries about just by, oh, this with the name. Whereas the census or the directories, um, or professional publications, a lot of professional serials like builder serials, chemical serials will have addresses in of the owners and people that work, and I use that frequently. But it's just okay. First of all, I'm going to search the house. You're going to have one piece of information, and you're going to try and match it with either the family who lives there or with the number. And sometimes you get it first try, sometimes you get it the third source or fourth source you find it. But you usually find it. Well, Highland Park's well documented, and we've done a lot of digitization, and materials documenting Highland Parkers have also digitized much. So the periodicals on Hathi and Internet Archive and Google Books, everyone always finds some answer, at least but a little bit of an answer. But boy, not knowing for the first few years I was working with it about those changes in 1905 and 1915, I think I gave people, I said, I couldn't figure it out. I just didn't know. What was this discrepancy, especially like Vine and Central and Hazel, where they had 4 or 5 different sets of numbers. I think I told people, I'm sorry, I don't know, or this is the best I can offer you. Whereas discovering, and I found it by happenstance when I was looking up something in the news article and or something in the Highland Park City Records. It's like, oh my goodness.
That's interesting. So 3 years into this job is when you figured that out. You would have thought somebody would have mentioned that like on day number one, you know, Stephanie or other people that would be aware of Highland Park's history.
I didn't think I knew when I started here on that, as Mr. George knows, I was hired to administer a National Archives grant to set up a formal archives program. I didn't know there was both a steam and electric train running through until 1963. I didn't know that. I thought, why do we have all these Deerfield books? Deerfield's next door, because this was Deerfield Township. There were like 100 things that I accumulated as I went through the stuff that I had to correct how I approached them later on, knowing that, oh, there's two big different train companies coming through. There's electric and there's steam, and who and what they were doing, what the pictures of and why. Yeah, it would have been nice to have a little introduction, but you jump in and learn. I think it's actually a docent at this. He's the one who put together the spreadsheet with the 1950 changes, who showed that with to me because I don't think I would have known. Maybe it
He
would
he had created it, or it was sitting around and nobody
he
just highlighted it to you.
Steve created it. He was a docent. He had a PhD from
Good for him.
MIT, and he had created it. And he'd used the phone books to create it. And over the years, we filled in if someone was moving right about 950, 52, they might not have be in there. And over the years, we've been filled those in with more resources, digital and otherwise available online.
Interesting. Good for Steve for doing that job. Was that an independent project? He just sort of started pulling it together and then he showed it to you?
He had it almost done when I started. He'd been there much longer, for a very long time. He said for
Right,
many
right.
years. Yeah, he said he just showed it to me one day. It's like, well, that's
Wow.
interesting. We didn't have a lot of people coming in, at that time. And a lot of the stuff, of course, was not cataloged. And I don't think, the richness of the collection, National Archives recognized that, of course. That's why they gave the grant. But this certainly was a hidden collection.
Yeah, that's too bad.
No, it's not.
Um,
No, it's not.
well, no, it's too bad it was treated that way, but I'm glad you unearthed all that.
Well, that's what I was there for, right?
Well, I get it. I get it. I get it. Well, George, I'm really thrilled you dropped in tonight. If you have any words of wisdom, please, because you are the map guy.
No, no, not really. This is quite different from what I usually have done. Anyway, I do have to get going now. I thank you very much. It's been very interesting.
Thank you, George. Have a good evening, and thank you, Mary, if you're still there.
Okay, thank you. A lovely time. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.